Hello, I'm Commandant Daniel Ayiotis, the officer in charge of the Military Archives, and I'm delighted to have the chance to give you a talk about the Military Archives and some of the collections we have related to the Decade of Centenaries and specifically the Cavan and Monaghan area. And I'm delighted to have been invited to do so by Cavan County Library Services. So I suppose I'll give you an idea of what I'm going to do. I'm going to start off with a whistle-stop tour of the history of the Military Archives, because our institution has existed for almost 100 years. In 1924, it will be 100 years of age. I think that's important to give you an idea of where we came from and why we have the records that we have in the first place. And then for the second part of the talk, I'm going to discuss some of the collections that are probably of most interest to people who want to research the Cavan and Monaghan area, specifically within the revolutionary period. The majority of these collections that I'm going to discuss are online as well, so they're very easy to access, with the exception of one which is only available on in the reading room, and one which is half available online and half available in the reading room. So let's start off, first of all, with an introduction to the archive itself. So first of all, the Military Archives, what do we do? Our mission statement is to acquire, preserve and make available the documentary heritage of the Defence Forces and the Department of Defence. So we are the repository for both military records and departmental records. The reason that mission statement is worded, I suppose, slightly openly by saying documentary heritage rather than just state records, is because while our primary MO is to acquire, preserve, and make available state records, and that's our legal remit, we also have over 1,000 private collections, as well as like several hundred oral history interviews. So we're a big believer in I suppose you can't have too many sources. So as well as the state records, we like to be able to supplement and enrich that narrative by having private collections and oral histories. So where exactly do we sit within the Defence Forces? The Military Archives from 1924 until 2012 fell under the remit of the Directorate of Intelligence. In 2012, the reorganisation of the Defence Forces, the Archives was moved to Defence Forces Public Relations Branch, which sits directly within the Chief of Staff's Division. And our sister units within that branch are the Press Office, the Information Office and the Audio Visual Section. Philosophically and ideologically, as an archive, Public Relations Branch is a much better fit for us than the Intelligence Branch. We are very much about making records as available as possible, and without kind of inferring anything negative on the role of intelligence services, our job is by necessity, and our ethos of our profession is to be a lot more, I suppose, open with the material that we have. Being a part of Defence Force, being a part of the Chief of Staff's Division is very important as well, because again, for us, an archive is an agent of accountability of the state and advocacy for the people of the state. And that's key to the mission of not just the Military Archives, but all archives. That's why we have archives in a state in the first place. So it's very important that the Military Archives is located within the highest rung of administration within the organisation. And the same should be said for any National Archive. So ideally, a National Archive should come under the Department of Taoiseach or Prime Minister or President, depending on the political setup of a country. The Military Archives is an official place of deposit under the terms of the National Archives of Ireland Act. So 1986, the first piece of archival legislation that this country ever enacted was passed, and that was the National Archives Act. This act provided for places to be designated what we call places of deposit. So in 1990, the following four places that you can see on the document here, the Military Archives, the Geological Survey, the National Library and the National Museum of Ireland, were all designated as places of deposit. And what that means is that these places they must, it's their statutory obligation to retain the state records for which they're responsible, in the same way that the National Archives does this with the Department of State. And the one difference with the Military Archives as opposed to the other three is that you can see we are not just the repository for military records, but also for the Department of Defence and the Army Pensions Board. So we are the only place of deposit for our parent Department of State that exists. All the other departments of state are obliged to deposit their records directly with the National Archives. And what do we do here at the Military Archives? Well, we have a range of services and functions that we provide both internally to the Defence Forces and the Department of Defence, and also externally to the public, which is probably more what the audience is interested in now. So statutory compliance within the organisation, particularly the statutory instrument of the National Archives Act, but also we have a role in assisting with freedom of information and data protection and things like that as well. Records management, all of our team here are qualified archivists, which means we are archivists and records managers, and that's information and skill set that we can provide both to our organisation, both the military and the defence and the Department of Defence, so both parts of the organisation. Freedom of information, I've touched on. Legal queries as well. Of course, you always have legal discovery in any kind of department of the state or public body, so we have a role in assisting with that. Military history, culture and heritage. We are the only institution within the organisation with a specific remit to look after and get involved in military history, culture and heritage. So we're very much involved with, I suppose, supporting and informing various, not only Decade of Centenaries, but national cultural, historical and heritage events in general. Academic, as an archive, naturally enough, we have a lot of interaction with the academic world. So as well as having academic research conducted in our reading room for everybody from secondary school students right up to the most popular and well-known historians and academics in the country. And we also engage particularly with third level and postgraduate archival courses and history courses as well. So very often, most of the big courses, whether it's in archives or in history or military history, we have them in once a year for a talk to the course on the resources that we have here. Genealogical, the Defence Forces are meticulous record keepers, especially in terms of personnel files. So our genealogical resources are very rich. Anybody that comes through the organisation will have a personal file, and they are accessible for the most part at the Military Archives. For anybody who is conducting genealogical research, I would suggest if their descendant or their family member who they're researching has left the organisation 30 years ago or more, contact the Military Archives. If it's more recent than that, contact the Area Records Officer. However, if we do get a query looking for a personal file that we don't have because it's still with the various Area Records Office, we'll pass it on, so that's no problem at all. We also have a great asset that's something I'm going to talk about today in the 1922 Army Census. I won't go into detail on that now. It is a great genealogical resource, but I'm going to be discussing that in the second part of the talk. And finally, the last 2 points that I have here: media engagement, public lectures and engagement. First of all, because we're part of the Defence Forces Public Relations Branch, and secondly, because it's part of our mission statement that I mentioned to make available the records that we have. We take that broadly and holistically. So for us, making available the records that we have isn't about just making them available in our reading room. It's also about this kind of outreach activity where I can use the internet to speak to anyone who's listening here tonight to let you know what we have and how you can access it. We're always happy to do so. So the whistle-stop tour of the Military Archives. This is Leo Whelan's painting of IRA GHQ 1921. And the man with the arrow over his head is the Director of Publicity, Pierce Beasley. And Pierce Beasley went on to join the National Army, and it was the activities of Pierce Beasley along with Captain J.J. Burke during the Civil War in terms of collecting records that are really, I suppose, the first archival activities of the Defence Forces on record. So in 1923, post-Civil War, Beasley wrote to the Chief of Staff to ask if he could retain Captain J.J. Burke on his staff while they put together what he termed a War Records Office, which would collect the historical documentary evidence of the Revolutionary period. However, this was denied because post-Civil War, the Army was massively oversized and over budget, and it was in a period of demobilisation and reducing its size and strength. So the Chief of Staff wrote to Beasley to say, it's a great idea, but I'm sorry, in the current circumstances where we're demobilising, there's no way that I can actually stand up a new office. So unfortunately, that did not happen. However, the requirement for such an office remained. And in 1924, this man, the Director of Intelligence, Colonel M.J. Costello, wrote to the Chief of Staff to propose the establishment of a military archives as part of the Directorate of Intelligence. So this is really where the military archive starts in 1924. Now, one of the real reasons for this was, one of the biggest reasons was that a large number of Costello staff were tied up with providing records to prove or to support people's claims for service under the Pensions Acts that have been introduced starting in 1923 to provide military pensions for people who had served during the revolutionary period. Now, this archive was run by these two men here. On the left, we have civilian clerk, Mr. Thomas Galvin, and on the right, we have Captain Alphonsus Blake. So these were the men who were responsible for the archive. So Blake was in charge of it, but the actual running of the archive was done by Galvin. However, Galvin left in 1926, followed by Alphonsus Blake in 1927. So for a while then, the archive was just left, it ended up kind of, it just became more or less ineffectual and more or less dormant. It was revived somewhat then in 1932 by this man, Colonel E.V. O'Carroll, who came in as the Director of Intelligence. And again, he was very keen on capturing the documentary heritage and the memory of the revolutionary period. And he instigated what was called the AngloIrish War Project, the AngloIrish War Project, where basically there was a call for written testimony from officers of the army who had pre-truce service. And this had mixed results, and it was a precursor to a project known as the Bureau of Military History, which is something I'm also going to talk about in a while. So while this had mixed results, this was a project that had support all the way from the President of the Executive Council and the Chief of Staff. And his assistant was this man, Staff Officer in Intelligence, Captain Niall Charles Harrington. Niall Charles Harrington had quite an illustrious and interesting career, which I don't have time to go into now, but he retired in the late 1950s as the Deputy Director of Intelligence. Now, O'Carroll left that position in 1934, but in 1935 then, we had this man here, J.J. Ginger O'Connell. He came in as, for the first time in 1935, as the officer in charge of the military archives. So while there had been a military archives as a part of, as a subsection, I suppose, of the intelligence section, it never held an actual colonel's appointment over it. So in 1935, J.J. O'Connell came in as the officer in charge. He was the first officer in charge of the archives. Again, this is him in Leo Whelan's painting. He was the Assistant Chief of Staff. And interestingly enough, he was kidnapped and held hostage in the forecourts. And it was this action actually that precipitated the outbreak of the Civil War hostilities and the shelling of the forecourts. He was demoted subsequently twice in the reorganization of the army following the Civil War. And this is him as a colonel. So he served as the officer in charge of the military archives from 1935 until 1944, when he died in service. So between 1944 and 1959, the archives was more or less just left to wither on the vine. And the 1959 reorganization of the Defence Forces, very often, regularly enough, the Defence Forces reorganizes itself, so it changes its strength and its establishment and disposition. So in the 1959 reorg, which was as we were kind of coming into the Cold War era, the archive was completely taken off the strength of the intelligence branch. And it was not until 1982 that it was re-established again. And that was because of several years' work prior to 1982 by this man, Commandant, formerly Captain Peter Young, when he started off in the press office, campaigning and fighting to have the military archives re-established. Peter served as the officer in charge of the military archives from 1982 until again he died in service in 1999. His contribution to the military archives as it stands today cannot be underestimated. It cannot be overestimated. The military archives as it exists today, I don't believe would exist without what Peter did. And Peter, of course, had 2IC. You see Commandant Victor Lang on the right there. So He was with Peter for the majority of the time. So only a couple of years after Peter re-established it, Victor came along as his second in command. And then upon Peter's death in 1999, Victor assumed command of the military archives as the officer in charge, and he worked there until 2012. And again, another man with a great legacy left behind at the military archives. So again, after Peter passed away, the military archives, again, was in great, I suppose, really in great danger of ending up being neglected or left to wither on the vine. And the reason that we still have what Peter established is thanks to Victor Lang. And finally, then coming into the modern era, Victor Lang was replaced by Commandant Daniel Kennedy as the officer in charge of the military archives. And Pádraig was the officer in charge in 2016 when our new building was opened up as part of the permanent reminders for 2016. These were capital projects built to commemorate the 1916 Rising. And so this is the new establishment that Pádraig Kennedy oversaw. So here we have a model of the military archives, I suppose our little campus in the corner of Cavan Barracks. So this area here that I have the cursor on is the repository, is the reading room downstairs, and upstairs are our offices. And again, on the profile picture here on the right, you can see downstairs, this is the Jury Archivist office, and behind that is the reading room, and upstairs are the offices and administrative areas. And this was a hospital block built in the 1840s, which was fully renovated. This building here, with the two pitched roofs, is the repository, and here it is in the other image. This was built from scratch, from the ground up. So you can see it has subterranean storage on the ground floor, 16 shelves high, and then the upper floor, which is on the same level as the administrative and office areas, shelves 10 high. We have approximately 21 linear kilometers of shelving in this building. It's climate controlled, and so the temperature is kept at 15 degrees Celsius, and the humidity is kept at 45 to 60% relative humidity. The only area that's not is our cold room on the upper floor, which is basically, I suppose, a small walk-in freezer with archival shelving, and that's used to store less stable media like certain types of film and photo stock. Finally, this old building here, which you can see, this L-shaped building, this was the former barracks guard room. This part here is the archives lecture room, so we're able to give lectures and run courses and things like that. And this part here is the Barracks Museum. So that technically isn't, that's not part of our real estate, but a lot of the material in there is on loan from the archives. Just to give you an idea of the size and scale of this project, this was the old hospital block built in the 1840s, and this area to the foreground is where the repository stands now. You can see the poor conditions of the reading room and the walls and the stairs. And this is the final product that we got. The design, the architect who designed it was, the lead architect was Commandant O'Connor from McCullough Architects. It's very much in keeping with, I suppose, the philosophy of that behind the archival profession and archival academia. An archival repository should reflect the importance and significance of the records that it holds to the state and to the people of that state. And the records of Oakley and Heron and the records held at the military archives are inextricably linked with the development of the modern Irish state through the revolutionary period. For that reason, and because of the fact that we are the custodians of these records on behalf of all of the citizens of the state, I think that this is an appropriate and a fitting building. It's respectful and it's appropriate to the records without, I suppose, memorializing the records in and of themselves. So while it is an appropriate and fitting and impressive building for the records to be stored in, it is also a very welcoming and accessible building. So even in terms of the finer points of the design here, as somebody comes into the barracks, an archive can be, I suppose, a bit more of an intimidating place for somebody to come than, say, a museum or a library, which people are more used to visiting. And doubly so if you have to come through the barrack guard, or the barrack gate, and there's a gate policeman at the gate seeing you in. So when you do arrive here, it's a nice open building, glass and wood, and a very welcoming place where people, I think, feel welcome to access and consult the records that we hold on their behalf and on behalf of the wider state. So a success story, most definitely. So that is just an overview of the story. Oh, sorry. So that is, I suppose, that's an overview of the archive itself, our history and that kind of thing. What we'll do now is I'm going to introduce you to some of the collections that we have and that are particularly relevant to people researching the Cavan and Monaghan area. So we're going to start off with our website. If you're not familiar with our website, I'll just go back to sharing screen again. So this is militaryarchives.ie. So we have various resources available on here. If you look along the top ribbon, all collections, about us, news and updates, FAQs, contact, genealogy, academic research, digital resources, education, media, and donate stroke community. So if you haven't seen our website, come along and visit it. We have the smaller navigation panes here as well, news updates. You can find our Twitter link here and featured Flickr images as well from our Flickr account. Now, if you go to this all collections tab here in the top left, you'll see a little arrow, a little drop down arrow. And this will introduce you to our major collections. So the one on the left are online collections. And these are collections that are digitized and fully available on our website. On the right, we have reading room collections. So what these are collections where either the finding aid is available on the website and you need to book an appointment to view them in the reading room because they're not digitized, or where there's a description here, but the finding aid itself needs to be consulted in the reading room. And you need to come in, have a look at the finding aid, let the duty archivist know what you want, and you can view it then in the reading room. So as I said, the majority of records that I'm going to talk to you about now are online for convenience. So let's start off here with online collections. And you come down here to the Military Service Pensions Collection. So the Military Service Pensions Collection owes its origin to a decision in 2006 on the 90th anniversary of the 1960 Easter Rising by the Taoiseach Bertie Ahern to afford public access to the pension application files and associated administration that was generated under the Various Pensions Act to provide pensions to people who had served during the revolutionary period. So this is almost, I suppose, a standalone website within the website. The Pensions Collection Project has its own project team, and that's all they work on. They're solely dedicated to this project. It's a huge project. It was started initially in 2008. Their first release of digital material was a few years after that, and they now regularly release tranches of files, usually a couple of releases a year. There are thousands and thousands of files currently on the website, and several thousand more to be uploaded and described by the archivists over the next couple of years. This is the most significant collection that exists concerning the revolutionary period, full stop. So I'll just show you the interface here. So you scroll down, you can see various items that you can select. So first of all, a good place to start if you haven't used it before, I suppose, is to have a look at, where is it? On the left here, about the collection. Origin and scope. So this tells you where these files came from. And if you haven't looked at this before, it's great to just give you a really quick bite-sized overview. So the Military Service Pensions Collection owes its origin to the decision of the Oireachtas of Stair South Erin in June 1923 to recognise and compensate wounded members and the widows, children and dependents of deceased members of Oblaid Heron, including the National Army, the Irish Volunteers and the Irish Citizen Army, through the payment of allowances and gratuities. And over time, in the subsequent Pensions Acts, provision was enhanced and broadened to include members of the Hibernian Rifles, Cavan and Monaghan, Fianna Éireann, and certain members of the Connacht Rangers. And those certain members of the Connacht Rangers are those who mutinied in India in 1920 against what the British were doing in Ireland during the War of Independence. So let's just go back to the pensions collection for a moment. So best thing to do, I think, search the collection, search the whole collection, and come down here, search the entire collection. And just to give you an idea of what this is about. So here's you have the various, if you're researching somebody from Cavan or from Monaghan or whoever you want to research, you can enter the data that you have here into the search box to see if there is a pension file associated with that person currently on the website. So let's just do a really simple search. We'll go to county within Ireland. We will select Cavan. and click search. So here we see 133 files are currently on the website related to Cavan. So let's start off with the first one here. Michael Baxter from Cavan. He was a member of the Irish Republican Army. So just for speed of download, I have downloaded his file already. So this gives you an example of the kind of the rich material that we have here on this file. So I mean this collection. So if you look here, even where I have the cursor, this is 188 pages of a file, digitized and fully accessible to people from the comfort of their own home. And as well as military history, this is social and cultural history as well. So you see not only the service that people had and the testimonies given on their behalf by other prominent people who they served with, but also especially in the correspondence from dependents, you see kind of people's financial situations, who'd emigrated to the States, who'd emigrated to Australia, who emigrated to Britain, who was given a pension, who wasn't. So a really rich resource. So here I've downloaded Michael Baxter's file, and you can see just an idea of some of kind of material that's kept in this file. And like I said, it's 188 pages of a file, so a really great resource. Let's have a look now. I mentioned the Connacht Rangers a few minutes ago. So if we scroll down here, we see this man here, John Smith, or possibly John Smythe, depending on how it's pronounced. And we can see that he was a member of the Connacht Rangers. Again, similarly, we have a file belonging to him. So under a subsequent act, I think it was the 1934 Act, the Connacht Rangers who mutinied in India in 1920 became eligible for a pension. Because they, of course, because they were court-martialed, lost their British Army pension. So here we have it. It's a smaller file, but again, it's 6 pages long. But again, we can see the original correspondence. So this is to the Secretary in the Claims Department, Department of Defence. And you can see this from John Smith himself. So that kind of really rich social, cultural, personal information that this provides. You can see the value of this collection. So, as I said, plenty of files there relating to people from Cavan if you want to search this. Now, the Military Service Pensions Collection also has a series known as the Brigade Activity Reports. So let's just go home again. So the Brigade Activity Reports, they're a series of the Military Service Pensions Collection. And again, this has really, I suppose, revolutionized local history. So these were created, as it says, between 1935 and 1941 to support the work of the Referee and Advisory Committee in the administration of the Military Service Pensions Act 1934. So if you can refer back to what I said about the reason for the military archives being set up in the first place to try and find documentary proof of and evidence to support people's claims. And imagine this was only a year or two. This was literally in the aftermath of the revolutionary period that there was difficulty finding this evidence and difficulty surrounding it. So this is 1934. So this is the following decade. So what happened was brigade committees were set up from IRA members of each brigade, and they put together reports kind of detailing the activities that took place within their area of operations, or in their brigade areas. And just on a smaller point there, maybe relevant to people who are researching, the reason for the 1934 Pensions Act was, if you remember, in 1932, Fianna Fáil came into power on the De Valera, and of course they had previously been the anti-treaty side. So under the initial Military Service Pensions Act, if you went anti-treaty, you weren't eligible for a pension. So now there are several ways of navigating this really. So first of all, let's start off by using this interactive map here, which is a really nice way to do it. So this has major operations on it, but it doesn't have all of the operations. So again, as you zoom in, you can see all the little pin markers around Ireland. So we're coming up to, let me just find Cavan there. A sec, sorry, let's zoom out. So there's Coot Hill, we zoom out Coot Hill. So what have we here? So you scroll over it, click the button, and then we have engagement with British forces at Lappinduff. and that was the 3rd Cavan Brigade, 5th Northern Division. So if you click on the name of the engagement, this page comes up with an introduction to the engagement itself, the date, brigade involved, and the units of that brigade involved. And then you have kind of key documents related to it. So here we have a letter from Michael McCartney, and it doesn't really with reference to a claim. Again, it's to do with a claim for service and involvement in this activity. And you also get related files as well. So this one here, A56 23 Cavan Brigade, 5th Northern Division. Another one here, it's a file, the pension file of John McCarthy. We have other ones as well. So I have one downloaded for speed of access. So this is the report of the West Cavan Brigade. So again, these are all downloadable on the website as well. And you can see it's 49 pages. And again, this details all of the activities that took place within that brigade area. And here we see a signature of the battalion OC as well. So again, these are an invaluable source for researching local history. You can also search by county. So if you drop down the banner here on the left and scroll down to Cavan, just give it a sec to load. So it zooms in on the map on the Cavan area. You have featured operations down here. So the capture of Arva Barracks, the ambush at Swanland Bar, the attack on Baileyborough. And then you have a list of all the operations mentioned in the Brigade Artillery report for the area, and you can simply just scroll down here and view them. So let's say the capture of Arva Barracks, 1st of September. You can click on this. And again, it brings us, gives us the details, brings us to a link to the brigade involved, the details of brigade involved, related documents. So click on this one, and here we see a map showing the position of Arva RIC Barracks, which was part of the Brigade Activity Report. And then also a related file, which is the actual Brigade Activity Report that this information was taken from. So again, a really invaluable resource. In terms, probably if I was to recommend one, if you can only access one, it would be this if you want to research Cavan and Monaghan local history. So again, military service pensions collection, an invaluable resource. Now, the second collection that I'm going to talk about is the Bureau of Military History. So between 1947 and 1957, the Bureau captured and recorded 1,773 witness statements from people who had taken part in the revolutionary period. And this wasn't just on the pro-treaty side, but this was pro and anti-treaty, and a few people from other places as well. A great resource. Dr. Eve Morrison has described it in her work as a work of a project of Republican reconciliation, because it did take the statements of both sides of the Civil War divide. So a really great project. These records, as well as a lot of contemporary documents which were collected and deposited with the Bureau at the time, were locked away in government buildings. This was because of the sensitivity of this material, because the Civil War, of course, was still within living memory. Now, people who gave a statement were given a copy of their statement, so some of the material was already out in the public domain. However, it wasn't until 1999, and the efforts of Commandant Peter Young and Katrina Crowe of the National Archives, petitioning government, petitioning the Department of the Taoiseach, that the records were made available to the public. So in 1999, the decision was made that they would be deposited at the military archives. So after some cataloguing and various bits and pieces that needed to be done, these were made available in the military archives reading room in 2004. And then I think it was 2012 or 2013, the digitized versions were made available online by a joint project of the military archives and the National Archives. It is now available. That was a standalone website. It's now available consolidated on the military archives website, which had subsequently grown since it initially went online. And the next phase now next year is that we plan to upgrade and put higher resolution versions of the witness statements, the contemporary documents. We want to put those online, and we want to attach the investigating officers' reports to the witness statements as well, because they're very telling as well, to do with the investigating officers' assessment of the reminiscence, the reliance or otherwise of each statement. So again, we're searching Cavan. So we go to online collections, Bureau of Military History is here. So we have about, search the collection, an index of the witnesses, an image gallery, audio recordings, and press cuttings. So let's go to search the collection. And a very simple search box here. So let's just type in Cavan. Again, we find 137 keyword references to Cavan in the collection. So let's start off by looking at this one here. Witness statement 768, that of Seamus McDermott, intelligence officer, IRA, Cavan Town in 1921. So again, I've downloaded this for expediency. Again, this is a six-page statement, as you can see here. Some of them are a couple of pages long. Some of them are tens of pages long. Some are even hundreds of pages long. It really depends on the individual who gave the statement. But again, for researching local history, you can see this. This is it's a small statement, but it's valuable to people researching this. It's chronology of national events in County Cavan, 1906 to 1923. Again, this is available fully online. So again, just an example of just one of the things that I found when I typed in Cavan into the search box on the Bureau of Military History. So let's just go back again to the other sections, and here we have CD index, and CD, that is the contemporary documents that were deposited with the Bureau. Okay, well, this is up. So as you can see here, this consists of some 2,500 documents submitted to the Bureau. Okay, many of which, as it says, are instantly recognizable as iconic documents of the period. So a few documents here. So this is the list of contemporary documents. It's a PDF. You can download it, and also then the various appendices as well to that. So just to give a really simple example, let's click on the contemporary documents document here. Again, I have already downloaded because it's 128 pages long. And so you can download this from home. Control and F to a very simple search. Look for references to Cavan. Okay, so in this one, we only have 2 references, but still, if you check the appendices, there are more in there. So this one here we have, it was deposited by Sean Corr of 27 Dingle Road, Cabra in Dublin, and is a copy of on Terranach dated 23rd of May 1936, containing story in Irish by Cuula of activities in Tyrone and Cavan during 1916. And the other item referencing Cavan is on page 110, and it is a deposit made of the administration of Ireland 1920 by an intelligence officer by a Captain Padraig Cowan, and he was an Irish volunteer, an IRA member in the Cavan Meath area 1916 to 1921. So again, the contemporary documents register, the register of contemporary documents is worth taking a look at as well as the appendices that come with it. So the military service pensions collection and the Bureau of Military History, they're really the two biggies, I suppose, when it comes to researching not just your own area of Cavan or Monaghan, but all of the country during the revolutionary period. I did mention genealogy earlier on, so let's go and have a look now at the Army Census collection. So here we have it here. So the history of this collection is that the National Army was established in early 1922. And because we had evolved from the IRA and from a guerrilla force, the hierarchy of the army and headquarters needed to find out exactly how many people we had, how many people needed to be clothed, paid, and armed. So a census was taken on the 12th and 13th of November 1922. And this is fully available on our website. So let's have a look. So there's 2 ways of doing it. First of all, you can use the map interface. So I'll scroll on there and show you that. Just let it load for a second. Okay, so we can zoom in. Let's go. So there's Cavan itself. So each of those are the places from which there was a return of the census. So let's click on, say Cavan, Belturbet, Clonus, Cootehill, or Ballybay, and then the census will pop up there. So again, I download them again. Let's go with Belturbet. And here's an example of census page returned from Belturbet. So if I zoom in, you can see they're high resolution, so they're easy to read on the screen. So here you have regimental number, rank company sergeant, corps, so B company Belturbet infantry, surname Fitzpatrick, Christian name Charles, age 33. He was from Ballina, County Cavan, number on the pay book, date of attestation, the place of attestation, religion, his next of kin details as well. So if you're doing some research on somebody from Cavan who was a member of, particularly if they were a member of the National Army subsequently, this is a great place to start, because as well as giving an address, you get an army number. So if you're going to search for their personal file with us afterwards, a really great place to start, especially if people have a more common name, is with the army number, because army numbers are really unique identifiers for members of the military. So I showed you the map interface there. There's also click on search. Again, a very simple way of searching again. So you can put first name, last name, age, and location. So again, very simply, just put in Cavan, submit, and here we have all of the census returns. So all the ones for, in alphabetical order, the ones for Belturbet, Cavan, and you have the right first name, last name, age, what page they're on, and for each one, you can download the page of the census that has their name. So there we have Belturbet, Cavan Town, Coot Hill, over here, Dowra, Mohill, Virginia Lodge. Okay. I suppose it's just a different way of navigating the information that's on the map interface. It just depends on how you prefer to work. So again, 1922 Army Census, another great collection for researching the 1922 kind of Civil War, post-Civil War period. Great resource. Okay, so now let's go home back to all collections again. Another collection I'd like to show you is the Collins Papers, 1917 to 1922. And this is very much as it says on the tin. These are records created by and sent to, or I suppose collected by Michael Collins and kind of the general headquarters staff in the course of their business during the 1917 to 1922 period. So now we just reload that now. So it has. Okay, so here we are, the Collins Papers. So again, you can, about the collection, give yourself an overview of the collection itself, search the collection, and then if you want to make contact with us about it, you can do that. So here's the description of the Collins Papers itself, so you can read that in your own time. The search function, again, it's quite straightforward. Click on search the collection. And again, we just have a limited number of boxes, so you can check the title of the file if you know it. You can search by keyword. If you have the file reference, so if you download the whole catalog itself, if you just put in the file reference as it is in the catalog, in that format that it is there, you can do that. Or if you want to just search or include a date range, you can do it by clicking on the calendars here. But again, let's just do a very simple keyword search for Cavan and see what comes up. So we have 5 results here. It might not seem by a lot, but one of the documents here that I found is really interesting if you're researching Cavan during the revolutionary period on Monaghan. So what do we have? We have IRA Cavan Brigade 1919, typed letters with some handwritten text from Adjutant General Michael Collins, the Commandant of the Cavan Brigade. Monthly intelligence report forms, and these were forms furnished by Brigade intelligence officers and returned to General Headquarters IRA. One on the Midland Division, correspondence between Director of Organisation, Training and Officer Personnel, attached to the 1st Midland Division. J file on the Auxiliary Division, so that's an intelligence file. And then we have communications mainly between Collins Intelligence Department, GHQ, Officer Commanding of the Cavan Battalion, and General Headquarters organisers in South Cavan and North Cavan. So again, some really interesting and useful information there. So you have a little drop down here as well if you want to see more. And then if there's a file you like to look at, you can see the extent. So there's 28 items in this file. Creators, Irish Republican Army, and then the scope and content. So that gives you much more information on what's in the file before you download it. You can quite simply just do Control and F, search for Cavan. If you just want to simplify your searching of the scope and content, But let's download this one here, the second form, monthly intelligence report forms. And I downloaded that as well, and here it is. So again, this is a really great document. So on page 39, it starts off with the Cavan Brigade IRA intelligence report. And you can see there's really great stuff in this as well. I'm not going to start reading it verbatim here because it would be a little bit boring, but you can see the details here of enemy agents and suspects as well. So really interesting stuff there. And also if you go back to page, I think it is 12, there is a section on the Monaghan Brigade IRA. So that's their intelligence report as well. So again, really interesting document if you want to look at the kind of especially if you want to look into the intelligence side of things in Cavan and Monaghan during the period. So now let's have a look at another collection. Now this is reading room only, but I definitely think is one worth looking at because we've had it for a long time, but we had it recently fully professionally catalogued to international standard for archival description standards. The finding aid itself is available online, and you need to book in then to view the material in the reading room. And these are the Department of Defence A-series administrative files from 1922 to 1935. So we click on the link, and here we are with its section on our website. The administrative and biographical history and the scope and content are all described here. So really in-depth overview of what's in this collection if you want to research it. And again, there are currently 151 boxes containing 4,596 files. Okay, so a really substantial collection. And these were the administrative file series of the Department of Defence from their foundation in 1922. These are followed then by what are called the 2-bar series. So those files begin 2/ and then the file number. And then after that, then the 3-bar series as well. So the A files, the AA/, that means they're the earliest records of the department. So down here, you download the finding aid itself. It's a PDF document. Again, I have it downloaded already. So it's quite long. It's 1,497 pages. But again, using the simple control and a function keyword search, type in Cavan, and we'll just wait and see how many it finds. Okay, so we have 10 references of 14, 15, 17. Hang on, let's find them all now. Okay, so we're at 41, so let's find 41 references to the search term Cavan in the finding aid. So let's just start off with a couple, and just to give you an idea of kind of how broad these files are. So the first one is a file titled Central Registry, Smith, Louis CP and Company Solicitors, Cavan, Re Murphy, Clonmel, Adjutant, Cork Command, Accountant, Munster and Leinster Bank, Youghal. So again, you see that the kind of social aspect history of this as well. So file containing material related to the account of Colonel Stephen J. Murphy, Cavan Central Cooperative Agriculture and Dairy Society, and his apparent failure to pay outstanding payments. Again, so really interesting there for some researchers. Where does Cavan pop up next? Doyle question, Sean Milroy TD, account Mr. M. Fleming, 13 Dolphin Avenue, Dublin, cycles, etc., commandeered at Kilishandra. Let's see what's next. Again, Doyle questions, Hugh Coulahan TD regarding careless and reckless driving of army motor vehicles. And it's to do with a volunteer McCullough from Baileyborough, County Cavan. Just pick a few random here. Again, prisoner, a regular release of weekly returns. And here we see, sorry, no, wrong one. This is Ministry of Home Affairs premises, Blackline, County Cavan, provision of accommodation for the Civic Guard. Again, a really interesting part of Irish history there. So the Civic Guard, which was the previous name of the Garda Síochána, who famously mutinied in 1920. I forget if it was 23 or 24. I think it was 23, but the Civic Guard famously mutinied. So an interesting bit of history there as well. Look, I'm just kind of picking a couple of them at random there, just to give you an idea of the kind of broad social history and the kind of higher level administrative history that you can find in this collection here of A files from the Department of Defence. So let's have a look at now. As I said, those files are only available in the reading room, so you need to download the finding aid, find what you want to look at, drop us an email to militaryarchives@defenceforces.ie, and you'll be booked into the Commandant Peter Young reading room to view them. So finally, let's look at one here that I'm particularly interested in, and this is the Unshin Macone collection. Now, this was deposited with us by the family of Unshin Macone in I think it was 2016 or 2017. It's a really interesting collection because I suppose Unshin's work very much focuses on people who were involved in the anti-treaty side and who were involved in the IRA. So come here, there's a little bit of information. It was 2018 that was deposited. So here's an introduction to the collection itself. It's a combination of I think 105 audio cassettes of interviews gathered by Unshin between the late 1970s and the early 1990s with people who have been involved in the kind of anti-treaty side of the Civil War and the IRA up until the 1940s. So if you click in here, you can find out about the collection. So kind of some biographical details about him there. He was a veteran Republican, very much a member, I suppose, of the Republican movement, which is why it's even more interesting to have it here at the Military Archives. We always say the more sources you have, the better. You can't have too many sources, and it's great to have this stuff. And it's great to see it. I hate to use such a simplified term as from the other side, but that's what it is. It really is great to see kind of history and opinion and work from that kind of other side of Irish history and Irish military history and social history. So what did we get? As well as there was 102 audio cassettes, as well as digitizing those, we got several boxes of material associated with Unshin's authoring of his 3 books: Survivors, IRA, The Twilight Years, and Harry, which is the biography of IRA man Harry White. So they were catalogued. The paper material was catalogued by our archivist Noel Brochet and is available in the reading room. The audio was digitized and time-coded abstracts were prepared by Dr. Tomás McConmara, who was our consultant for establishing our oral history project, and he's also specializes in this area of Irish history as well. So in order to navigate the audio recordings, we have time-coded abstracts, which are basically break down each interview by time code and by theme. So again, searchable using the Control F function. So let's have a look at search the collection. So again, what you can do is, if you want to put in a title, a keyword, a file reference, a source, or a date, you can put it in there. So let's just do a very simple one for references to Cavan. And they pop up here. So the source is from Harry White, so it's the material concerning Harry White. Because it says A here, so H is for Harry. And just to explain the code here, that's Unshin Macone collection, UMCE. H is the Harry series, A is the audio sub-series, and 6-7 is the file reference. So drop it down here, and we see the time coded, the time code for it. So if you go to whose interview is this? Okay, so if you go to this cassette, UMHA0607, between 46 minutes 45 and 1 minute 13:39, this is what you will get. So brief discussion here about photographs of Tom Williams. It's not clear who some of the other main subjects discussed are. Reference to a shooting of Paddy, Germany in October 1942, and references Cavan there as well, just to give you an idea of how this works. So again, you just get in touch with us and tell the duty archivist that you want to listen to this file in the duty room, and you can do that. Now, there is another way of doing it. If you want to have a look at the whole time-coded abstract, if you click here on this PDF file, just give it a sec to download. I haven't got it pre-downloaded. So here you have the entire listing of the material. And as you can see, it's 1,276 pages. But again, if you click Control and F and put in a search term, I think we just put in. Sorry, I haven't downloaded that fully, so it might be a bit slow. Okay, so just for something new that will come up, so IRA, just 4,356 instances of it. So again, you can search that way as well. Search by Cavan, search by Monaghan, search by a person's name, whatever way you want to search it. And again, Uinse McOwen's work really covered kind of a lot of the country. So again, well, like all of the collections that I mentioned so far, they covered the whole country. We don't have collections based solely on counties, but we do have collections with a lot to do with specific with each county in them. Again, Uinse McOwen's work is different. Now, as well as that, the books that Uinse wrote in the end, they're quite difficult to get hold of because they're out of print. So if you come here to our digital resources, one of those resources is Uinse McOwen publications. So what we did, because the books are out of print and they're very expensive if you want to get them online, we had them digitized and made fully available and searchable on our website. So his books, Survivors, IRA, The Twilight Years, 1903 to 1948, and Harry. So they're all available to download on our website. So for example, IRA, The Twilight Years, I downloaded that. It's quite a large file. It's 998 pages of a book. And again, quite simple, Control and F, type in Cavan. It's searching all the references to Cavan in the book. So it's a really accessible way of using the book without having to get a hard copy. So it's found 31 references to Cavan. So here we have John Tully of Cavan, and let's see, so Cavan killings, 8 men were being held at this time, charged with the murder of James Sorgan and his wife on December 11, 1923 at Coruscant. What's the next instance? To do with the by-election results in Cavan. Again, Free State by-election results for Cavan. John Sheridan of Ballina County, Cavan returned for trial to Cavan. So again, a great way of referencing stuff that happened during the 1923 to 1948 period, especially concerning the anti-treaty IRA side. So again, those are all available on our website. So I will stop sharing now. Okay, so I think I really come to the end of people's attention span. So I'll wrap it up with that. So again, hopefully I've given you an overview of the history of the military archives, who we are, what we're about, and to give you an idea why we have the material that we have. And then I've gone through the collections there. So militaryarchives.ie is the website, and the collections that I mentioned, the first one was the Military Service Pensions Collection, then the Bureau of Military History, the 1922 National Army Census, the Collins Papers, the Department of Defence A files, and then the Uinse McOwen collection, as well as digitized Uinse McOwen books, which are kept in the digital resources section of our website. So as far as I'm concerned, those are really the big collections to use if you want to research your local area, Cavan or Monaghan, during the revolutionary period. How I suppose you can find that from 1913 to 1923. So yeah, hopefully that is of interest and of use to you. We do, of course, have plenty of other resources there that will have references to Cavan and to Monaghan as well. So go onto our website and play around with it and have a look. And then if you have any questions or if any further information, go to send an email to militaryarchives@defenceforces.ie. That is the duty archivist email address, and that's also, as well as for queries, that's the email address for booking a spot in the reading room. Be delighted to hear from you. Hope that's been of some interest and some use. Thank you very much for your attention. Take care. Thanks.